All right. Let everyone mosey back to their seats. But yes, thank you everyone for attending our day 2 of the Idea Showcase sessions. Just an announcement, as you can see, normally we have 4 people for these, but we have an empty chair. Claudia Aiken from the Furman Center at NYU was ill shortly before this, so she unfortunately will not be able to present on her presentation on building data capacity for equitable housing policy. So we'll have her present that at another virtual Idea Showcase, so we'll definitely have that and have that recording up eventually. But for today, we have 3 excellent panelists, presenters. We have Kenton Spencer from DataWorks NC in Durham, who will be presenting on data approaches to property tax relief. We have Mike Henderson from the Center for Poverty and Community Development at Case Western in Cleveland, who will be presenting on data in youth homelessness. And we have Jeff Matson from the University of Minnesota, the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs, who will be presenting on voter outreach in the 2024 election. So first, we'll go with Ken. I'll hand it over to him.
All right. Okay, thank you, Cole. This is my first time here, first time presenting, so appreciate it. Do I get Claudia's time? No, I don't. Okay, welcome, thank you. Strengthening Neighborhoods, Data-Driven Approaches to Property Tax. So again, my name is Kenton Spencer, I'm with DataWorks. I also want to acknowledge the hard work of Allison Young, our data scientist and PI on this project, as well as collaborating with our local North Carolina Housing Coalition under Hudson Vaughn, and also with NNIP, that is a critical sponsor and a supporter of us. So we're going to talk about top view in regards to different ways of looking at property tax assessment, which is a critical issue. We talked about wealth gap, wealth disparity. So these are some of the things that we're looking at: assessment to sales ratio, price-related differentials, price-related bias, and coefficient of dispersions. Technical stuff that, to be quite honest, I'm a survivor of trauma-induced math. That's why I went to law school. So attorneys, we don't do math unless you're doing divorce. So quality and control metrics for appraisal, yeah, we'll map that out really well. So median sales ratio should be between 90 and 110. This will come up when we start looking at specific properties. PRD should be between 98 and 103. Anything greater than 103, particularly over 110, creates regressivity. Okay, so here in Durham County, what we looked at is basically over 64% of the lowest value homes were overassessed, okay? And then 29% of the highest value homes were underassessed. And if you look at the graph on the right, you see what I term the cliff of death. It's basically where you have lower value homes. So here's an example where you have 2 properties. They are comparable in size and also in age, but the property on the left, if you look at the total value is, looks like here, yeah, 3.5, and it's sold for 4.2, so it's underassessed, whereas the other home hasn't done any improvement, but its value is greater than what it was sold for, okay, almost doubled. Here's another example where we have a home. One of the things is that you look at the year of being built, the effective year built is actually the year that it's been rebuilt. So in this one here is 1990. The other one is effective year built is 2015. But what you see is that the total value is 674, sales price 737, but the other one was then also overassessed. Here's another example that we found, and this is what we're looking at, is that where you have comparable land value, but the difference is the building value. So one of the things that we notice is that, again, with assessors, they are not linked to MLS. So they say they're looking at market value, but what they're really looking at is the price of the nearest home sold. So here's an example when we start looking at it through plotting basically the ratios. This is a neighborhood that is fairly evenly assessed between what is the value and what is the market. So you see that you have a good distribution in regards to the curve, especially with PRD and standard deviation. But now you see the difference. Again, you starting to see that little, what I call the cliff of death. You see then homes that are basically overassessed to the left, but their market price is much lower. And so the question you start asking yourself, and you can see here the median sales ratio is above the general standard of tolerance. So the question is then comes to what is causing this, and that's part of where our study is. So one of the things that we want to look at too is that we want to also apply a multidimensional approach, so like geospatial analysis. So we're looking at the density of investor-owned homes within neighborhoods, particularly marginalized neighborhoods, disinvested neighborhoods. We also want to map gentrifying trends, as in how many homes that are being rented out and also being used, owned commercially as well. Here's an example. Again, full disclosure, I am a Tar Heel, so it gave me great pleasure to go ahead and map out property owned by Duke. So here in Durham, Duke is one of the largest landowners. So for your communities out there, if you start doing this type of study, start thinking also about institutional property owners and the impact of those property owners that aren't paying taxes and how it then shifts the burden to neighborhoods. Also longitudinal studies. Again, we're looking at snapshots, but then over time, this is also a critical strategy in looking at those marginalized communities when we start looking at how the impact over time. Because the other thing too is that in many of these traditional communities, home ownership is 20, 30 years and longer versus investor home ownership. So here's an example. So we have two homes. The one on the left is investor-owned. It's been flipped a number of times. The one on the right is a traditional home. It's in Walltown. Walltown is the historically black community in Durham, okay? And so you can see over a 12-year period, that black, historically owned, one owner home, property tax has risen over 300%, okay? And so there's a thing you say, right? When we talk about policy and economic impact, the thing is that something happens once as an event, happens twice, becomes a habit, third time, then you're talking about a trend, right? Fourth time, in my opinion, it becomes a systemic, intentional design of the system. So that's one of the things you want to look at, and that's what we're trying to study, is how to create a predictive model and looking at the policies, how do we then, instead of having constantly appeals and appeals, to create programs and processes that these marginalized communities can go ahead and get tax abatement and protect their generational wealth through their home. So these are just some key data metrics, but one of the most important things I want to emphasize besides the whole list of this has to be community-based. This is one of the things, because you can just look at the data, but you got to get into the neighborhood. So when you do this study, that's it. Okay, get into the neighborhoods, talk to the people, make a difference. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Mike Henderson. I'm with the Center on Poverty and Community Development at Case Western in Cleveland, and I'm here to talk a little bit about a project we just wrapped up that was designed to estimate the size of the population of youth and young adults in Cuyahoga County experiencing homelessness. And full disclosure, there are a couple slides I decided I didn't want, so I'm just going to cheat and ignore them when they come up. So this was a HUD-funded project that was implemented in several cities throughout the U.S. And the focus was on youth homelessness because young people we know are less likely to interact directly with like homeless service providers, more likely to couch surf, stay with friends, things like that, than get direct help from homeless service providers. And so our goal was to show how we can leverage the power of integrated data to get a more comprehensive count of the total population of vulnerable people who might need help, and also find leverage points for intervening to prevent homelessness experiences. So I'm trying to remember, okay, yeah, so our approach was, we took this, there was a slide missing, but so we took this integrated data system that I thought was in there, but that has direct measures of homelessness, like our homeless service provider data, school data, and we complemented it with what we're calling this address list component. These are data sources that we get that have indicators of homelessness, but that are not directly homeless data sources. And so we identified every person who was between the ages of 13 and 25, and we tried to identify which lists, homeless indicator lists, they showed up on. This address list component. We talked to service providers, talked about how they enter data, and found ways that we can use the address fields in those data sources to identify kids who are experiencing homelessness. We also, so this came up in the previous session, structuring your quantitative research within the context of, on the ground local knowledge. In this case, we mostly talked to data experts that, at the service providers. And, we did find that there are a lot of challenges facing folks who work with youth experiencing homelessness. Some of the main things that they have to deal with are issues of just not having the time, dealing with administrative burdens, basically, that don't allow them to think about connecting with other agencies and kind of making system-wide change by identifying, just working together across organizations. So our ongoing analysis shows, I'm about to talk about this method that we use called multiple systems estimation, or MSE. That's a method that we use for, this is, okay, I thought this was gone, so I'm gonna ignore this. We basically look at the patterns of overlapping appearances of a child as being flagged as experiencing homelessness across multiple lists. And the basic idea is when we see kids appearing in multiple lists, there's, the school data indicates homelessness, and another data set indicates that if we see lots of overlap there, that suggests that we're capturing more of the total homeless population. Here's the kind of an illustration of the concept. And when we see lots of kids only showing up in like list A or only showing up in list B and very rarely showing up in both lists A and B, that suggests that there are lots more hidden kids that we're not able to see. And I thought I had couple other slides, but that's okay. So, one more thing. We've got a really cool community guide that's about to be published if anybody is interested in doing this work in their own city, that they can draw on. I've also got a GitHub repo with some code and a toy data set if anybody's interested in seeing how this multiple systems estimation concept, how that method works. So.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Jeff Matson, Cura, University of Minnesota. And I don't know how many in this room are aware, but there's a big election happening in a couple weeks. Especially when you're in Michigan, you find that out. So we partnered with a number of organizations to try to help some of our community partners who are involved in Get Out the Vote efforts. And so two kind of primary ways to approach this in voter engagement. One is kind of by geography, so what does the population in a specific place look like, and do they vote? Or the other is if you have a targeted population, where are they? So the data we're using to do this, precinct level turnout data from our last statewide election, 2022, and then ACS data on race and ethnicity, also from 2022, and also by precinct. And so the voter turnout data is actually the number of voters divided by the eligible voting population, which is a little trickier than you might think. We actually get that data from the election lab at the University of Florida because our Secretary of State's office doesn't believe the census data is very good. So then the precinct demographics here, we've got, again, precinct level demographic data for all the major race and ethnicity categories in the census, along with the number of voters and the turnout. And we put those together, and we were able to create a web app precinct level, state of Minnesota, showing both turnout by precinct as well as race and ethnicity by precinct. And the nice thing about having these both together is that you can do this bivariate mapping that shows both variables on kind of the same scale. So these areas in yellow happen to be areas of high BIPOC population and low voter turnout. And depending on the groups you're working with, you can identify exactly those precincts you need to target. Some of the other layers in this application that are associated with low voter turnout include younger voters, senior citizens, as well as renters, different groups that have different challenges in either getting out to vote or choosing to vote. One thing that we make very clear in the pop-ups here is that these data don't show turnout by race, but they show turnout and race. So we know the turnout in a precinct, we know the demographics of a precinct, and we can kind of correlate the two, but we're not saying that they're exact. Another thing that we're putting up in kind of the background are county level averages, because we realize that high and low can really be relative terms depending on where you are in the state and the demographic group that you're looking at. So you can compare a precinct to its county demographics. The website also allows for filtering and downloading. You can filter the data by city, by county. You can even filter by attributes, so you could select only those precincts that are majority renter if you wanted to, and identify those. Some of the limitations, I guess I mentioned most of these already. We're not showing turnout by race, but looking at them individually, high and low are relative. And of course, 2022 was a non-presidential election, so turnout is always lower. My absolute favorite aspect about this project is that one of our community partners, Voices for Racial Justice, has taken the lead in becoming experts in using this map and training others to use it. So they had us develop a custom view of this map that really fits their mission, which is building BIPOC voting power. So they've got a separate map linked to their website, and they have trained a number of organizations. I think they've done 8 or 9 trainings already and continue to do them right up through the election, working with groups, a wide, diverse set of groups, Somali Youth and Family Center, African Career and Education Resources, Coalition of Asian American Leaders, et cetera, et cetera. The Secretary of State's office in Minnesota also gets asked this question all the time, and they always say, we don't know, when they're asked about turnout by race. So they've put a link to our website on their data and map page, and it leads you here to this one place on the Cura homepage, which I've been told over the last 2 months is now the second most popular page on our website after our homepage. So people are actually finding their way here and hopefully using the map, which is kind of exciting. Close your eyes for 15 seconds. This slide doesn't exist. I was interviewed by a data journalist who promised to write an article and feature this map. I walked her through the whole thing, and it hasn't come out yet. So what are we going to do next with this? We're, of course, going to update it after 2024. And then I really want to add this margin of victory data in, because these precincts that you see in purple surrounding the center cities are places where the margin of victory in the last election were within 5 percentage points of 50%. So very important places. Here's the website. Go vote. Shout out to my research assistant, Deepika, who built most of these maps, and I just stand up here and take the credit for it. So, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to our 3 wonderful presenters. I think it's about 1:35, so we have about 10, maybe a little more time for Q&A.
I think the pasta's kicking in.
Yeah. Got one in the back.
So that was really neat, Jeff, the voter turnout map, and I'm just looking at our map to see if we could do it. Were you surprised by anything that you found? Where were the big surprise areas?
I think this is on. I think we kind of knew, like in the central cities, that BIPOC population and low turnout are pretty highly correlated. I think finding some of the areas where more renters live than we expected, as well as in greater Minnesota, which we don't study as often, tribal lands and places where immigrant communities have been moving into Minnesota for agricultural and kind of food processing jobs showing up, areas that have changed a lot over the last 20 years, I guess would be the biggest things.
Hi, Kenton. That was a great presentation on the assessor's data, something that I work with. I'm curious how you get or where you get the data from, and if the data you collect can be provided over those time intervals to do sort of like that, like the property sales over time, and if not, where you're estimating that change.
Right, yeah, exactly. So again, varying upon different jurisdictions, assuming, but at least the basic data table in regards to property taxes and parcel data is public. But again, it's siloed. So first, normally you get the revaluation table, depending again on the process, but you get the land value is done first. You get that separated table, and then you get a massive data dump from the county, and it's basically just a massive data dump, and then you have to clean that up, and that's what we do. Is then we clean it up to make sure then we start aggregating and segregating key points, investor homes, commercial properties, and then we also then start parceling it down to the various neighborhoods. And then we then hyperlink and map it then to the actual parcel information like you saw on the slides, where the home rating, permitting, rebuilt, that's in a whole separate database. And so so like I was explaining to fellow colleagues from the great city of Wilmington, we exploit graduate students for this type of stuff. So no, they're willing. They're willing for recommendations and all that sort of stuff. But that's the thing. That's why it's hard work, because it's a heavy lift, and it's designed that way that requires some manual labor. That's part of it. Then the other part, which is the harder part, is the market. How do you get the sales? And again, MLS is proprietary. So unless you're going to spend a huge amount of money, but you have to be a licensed realtor. So either start making friends at the Realtor Association. So like, for example, we partner with the North Carolina Housing Coalition. Hudson Vaughn with the Justice Collaborative has a membership with MLS. But even still, it's a large data. So the other thing then you might have to end up doing web scraping. You might go ahead and do Redfin, Zillow. But again, there's going to have some little bit of variability and error in regards to that, anywhere from 2 to 6%. So what we're doing is, I lean towards Zillow because with their Zestimate, I go to the lower conservative end. But again, we're going to share with the team here what we find out. So that's also part of this too, is this cross collaborations, that to share this, to say this is what we found. This may be the best practice, may not, but that's what we're doing. But the other critical thing, and this is the point I didn't get to the slide. I was hoping to take up Claudia's time. Was community engagement is so critical. Many of these communities, especially historical communities, ethnic communities, they have so much of historical knowledge in them. You have individuals that live there that they know each and every property. So we went and visited one community, did a drive-by, no, it's not a bad word, drive around, and basically pointed out, yeah, here, they've lived here 30 years. No, this just got sold, because also, again, as we know, with database information changes so much, so we're able to then map on the ground the lived experience to the data, and of course you can't do it with every neighborhood, but the ones with the highest level of regressivity, that's what I would suggest doing, because then you bring that in, and then that helps to inform and to contextualize what you're actually studying. Does that help? That's a little, but I try to be as comprehensive as possible.
All right. Hi, I'm Katie from Charlotte. This is a question for Jeff. With your voting work, I was wondering if you could maybe speak to the policy implications of both the effect of different political boundaries and districts on kind of voter turnout, and maybe like a little bit of background on how voter boundaries are drawn, and if you're worried about this kind of data being misused at all. Coming from North Carolina, I know we have some legislatures who would look at data like this and figure out, how to use it to further disenfranchise people. If that's something you're worried about in Minnesota.
So yeah, I have to admit I have no idea how precinct boundaries are drawn. I know that they're, at least in the central cities, they come from the ward boundaries, and that's a whole political process every 10 years to redraw those, and then they realign the precincts after that. But to answer your second question, the community partner that's really taken the lead in doing the trainings on these, we spend a good half hour, 20 minutes to 30 minutes at the beginning of each training session, kind of talking about the importance of kind of responsible use of this data and what it should and shouldn't be used for and what it does and doesn't tell us. And it's not to say that it couldn't be misused, but at least with the folks that we work with, we trust that they're going to do the right things with it. We actually, and maybe this gets at this as well, we don't have kind of an explicit link to this from our website. It's like you have to know about it to find it, and who knows what will happen when this journalist writes her story, and whether that increases views, and we have another set of problems, but so the link comes from the Secretary of State's office, and they were also very explicit in not having it look political, which is why they were the ones that kind of pushed us to separate out this version that our community partners, who are very explicit about building BIPOC voting power, from just a map that's like very vanilla and like, oh, here's voter turnout, here are demographics, you decide what this means. So they didn't want to kind of be seen as aligned with that version of the map, because they didn't want to be accused of politicizing just the fact that we all want more people to vote. So I don't know if that answered the whole thing, but.
Okay, really quick.
Really quick. Sorry, an actually related question. Did you consider how non-competitive elections affected turnout? And that's something that's particularly with gerrymandering, for example, affects, you have a lot more non-competitive elections.
Right, no, and that's kind of going forward, it's on our to-do list, is what do we do about the fact that every election is unique and every race within every election is unique. So that'll be the challenge for going forward if we want to update this, is how can we really claim that anything made the difference if it was completely different people running, completely different type of election. So we're gonna work on that.
To time.
Yeah, I think we're about out, yeah. So.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
again. Another hand for our presenters.